All right, welcome back to Callahan Corner. This is episode 5, and today I have with me Conor Kelly. He is a politics major at Loras College. How you doing, Conor?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm good. Thanks for coming on today. How are you?
Uh, thanks for having me. I'm also a history major, by the way.
Oh, perfect. That's good to know. And I heard you're writing a book on COVID-19.
Eventually, I've actually been accumulating newspapers that sort of show, particularly to Illinois, because it was one of the first states to actually start closing down how coronavirus affected Illinois and its relationship to the nation as a whole. But yeah,
That's
eventually.
that's awesome. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is abortion in the elections. You know, I'm a
Mhm.
pro-life guy, and we've had our fair share of, of debates in the
Yeah.
past. But I just wanted to touch base on abortion in an election year and how that kind of shapes the election. Not only within Catholics or in the pro-life movement, pro-choice movement, or uh, opposition to the pro-life movement, but like the courts, Supreme Court,
Mm.
um, and yeah, because I like to keep my podcast or whatever you want to call this, because it's not really a podcast, but um, on the pro-life issues, this news channel. So yeah, if you want to just touch base on those few things, I can give you, since I had a few questions in there, I'll give you double the time. So I'll give you about 4 minutes to answer um, all that right there, because it's kind of loaded there.
Alrighty. So what questions do you have for me?
So the first one was on the issue of um, abortion in the election and how it shapes the election.
Okay, so in my opinion, abortion is a big issue in the political system, but it's also a polarizing one. I had looked up some statistics the night before on this, just how it affects public opinion. This was a Pew Forum research thing that took data from 1995 to 2019. One of the things they found was 61% of American adults believe that abortion should be legal in all or most cases, compared to 38%. So the pro-choice movement in terms of like the overall adult population is statistically more likely to believe in general cases to be more leaning towards pro-choice on that issue. So it can be a bit difficult for some politicians to talk about abortion depending on the area they're in. That said, there is some differentiation in terms of the different groups. So, for example, on both ends of the things, where people who say abortion should be legal in all cases and people who say it should be illegal in all cases, those groups are actually lower on the statistical thing. People who say either it should be legal or illegal in most cases, but with some exceptions, that's where the contemporary voter is at. But with regards to the issue, how much abortion affects the electorate, it's still in the top 10. From that same source, we ended up seeing that, actually, no, different source, it was Gallup. The top 3 issues for American political interest are healthcare, terrorism / national security, and gun policy. 35% of Americans consider healthcare to be extremely important. 34% consider terrorism and gun policy to be extremely important. And 33% of Americans said education is extremely important. By contrast, um, abortion is the 8th most important issue. Not insignificant, mind you, and it can be used very well by Republican policy strategists and political advocates to talk about the issue, but it will not be the sole deciding factor in this election.
Oh, okay. And I would agree with you there, especially within in the age that we're living, or in the day that we're living in today with the COVID virus. More people are not really interested in all those topics are probably still the top 10, whatever. But I feel like COVID is going to take a big role come November, and on how both potential administrations, whether it be the current one or Joe Biden's perceived administration, take up COVID and all of these issues as a whole. So
Yeah,
kind of,
I
yeah,
would just, if that's okay, I don't mean to interrupt. I think it's also worth noting that this data is from 2019, so it probably is consistent to 2020, but with COVID-19, I think the healthcare issue is going to go up a little further because our response has not been the best, so that may contribute as well.
and yeah, we can get to that in the COVID bit too, but move kind of continuing on, and I will give you another 2 minutes for this follow-up or this next question to that. Since abortion is a big issue and the Supreme Court is agreeing to hear more and more abortion cases, do you think that plays a role in this year's election, being that because they are picking up more cases that have to do with abortion, that in this cycle or in this term, that this will be more of a factor going forward?
Um, it's kind of hard to tell. The thing about like this current election is a lot of it is going to be impacted by COVID. So how much attention is paid to that in the media discussions surrounding abortion may severely restrict our ability to predict it, how it's going to affect us. But I also think that it will play a role to some extent. The problem is, as I noted earlier, it's a polarizing issue. So both people on the left and on the right have to be careful in an election how they handle that issue if they want to appeal to independents. And independents, whether they lean left or right, are the areas in which people tend to win elections. You gain enough of the independents and shore up your base, you are more likely to win the election. But if you drive those independents away, not so much. I'd also say that the court in Roe v. Wade didn't say that there was a right to abortion so much as there was a right to privacy. So questions about the right to privacy and how it plays a role in future cases, not just on abortion, other issues entirely, could also affect the election.
Right, and I agree with you on that. On the aspect of it was a question of privacy in Roe v. Wade, and that kind of opened the door to legalized abortions in the United States. And then I think that's why many politicians and many legal scholars on both sides of the debate, pro-life and pro-choice, think that Roe versus Wade was a terrible argument for abortion because it was not necessarily on the constitutional right to an abortion. It was the constitutional right to privacy, which has nothing to do with abortion. And that's why it's still a gray area as to what the Constitution specifically says. And I think that's why that we do have such a polarizing debate in America, is because we have these pro-choice people that say they want a codified Roe v. Wade that says, abortion is legal in the United States. Because, as I said before, pro-choice legal scholars and lawyers and justices on the Supreme Court, they all disagree whether Roe v. Wade should stay precedent or not. And I think it's one thing to it's an interesting topic to talk about because it was a terrible case ruling, not because it legalized abortion per se, but because I would argue because it legalized abortion, it's a terrible case. But overall, that's not the only issue that why people say it's a terrible decision, because on both sides there are legal scholars that say the opinions of the courts, the dissenting and the concurring and the majority opinion was that the true question was not asked or was not answered in Roe v. Wade, whether abortion is found in the Constitution.
I would argue, and I'm not a big fan of Roe v. Wade for a variety of reasons, but when it pertains to court cases and when it pertains to setting precedents, the precedent that's set is not usually determined by what the judges want, but more so how they react towards the questions that the one who brings the case brings forth. So Roe's argument was based on a case in the Supreme Court called Griswold v. Connecticut, which established a precedent for the privacy involved in marriage or in reproduction and things like that. So I would argue that in most cases, you will never get a codified answer. You get a general precedent, and from there, an interpretation is based. But because Roe brought her case on the basis of privacy rights and the 14th Amendment, particularly the due process clause, the court was never going to say, yes, abortion itself is a right. They were going to say privacy is a right. So to me, that's not so much an inevitability, mind you, a bad case argument, but more so the inevitable result of the case itself.
Right, and I think that the thing that everybody forgets in this whole, and we use it a lot in the pro-life movement, and that is that Roe and Doe, the two people that were in the Doe versus Bolton and the Roe versus Wade case, they both were pro-life when they died. They were both pro-life their last 10, 15, whatever years of their life. And I think people actually even longer than that, because I think they were pretty young when the case was brought on their behalf. But and the court wouldn't even listen to them at that point when they begged for a retrial, or not a retrial, but for a relook at the case. The court denied them.
Yeah. My understanding is in order to bring a case, you need standing, and standing requires some element of injury. So like in Roe v. Wade, the court basically said that the injury was that she could be jailed or whatever. In this case, if I had to guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, if someone wanted to revisit the case, they would also have to prove injury, which is a consistent standard in other cases. So that may play a role. I'm not defending them in that case. I'm just trying to contextualize it.
Right, and the thing that I don't get, and the pro-life movement doesn't get, is, and this is kind of what we're hoping to hear in this June medical case. Actually, I was at a pro-life training, Students for Life, and this guy was, this attorney was talking about the June medical case, and one of the questions in that case is not only does an abortionist need referral privileges to a hospital, or admission rights to a hospital. They also need the second question in that case is, does an abortion clinic even have the standing to sue these pro-life governors, these pro-life states, when there's no patient that is necessarily involved in that case? They're not suing on the behalf of their patients. They're suing on the behalf of their industry, which is therefore, the courts could say that's not standing to sue, because there's no. It's like if I sued Apple for me throwing my phone out the window and it breaking. I did argue, it. Okay. It's my own injury. They're not. You know what I mean?
I would say that your example, I get what you're trying to say, but the example doesn't really fit. But I would say that when it comes to like the standing issue, that is not a unique question, and it is one that has been up for debate, not just with pro-life or pro-choice or with Planned Parenthood or any other organization that uses abortion. There is an argument I've heard that the injury is a failure to keep a consistent precedent. So like if someone wanted to bring suit, they would argue perhaps that the injury itself was not against an individual, but against the entire court system. So like if they wanted to say, you guys set this precedent, this state's not following this precedent, and considering under the supremacy clause of the under the Sixth Amendment, not the Sixth Amendment, actually, yes, it is, I believe the Sixth Amendment, right here, I'll pull it up, supremacy clause right here, that the government has the full authority to basically enforce this. Now, the court could say, well, there's no injury to a specific person, which is your argument, but some people could be arguing that because letting this issue stand causes a contradiction between Roe v. Wade and the state action, that it creates a problem for the court system, has to be answered anyway.
Right, but again, that's not standing to sue.
No, I get what you're
Which,
saying. I'm saying they're arguing that it would be a form of standing because the injury is against the system itself, which honestly probably wouldn't stand well because it's a very rare argument that holds. Um, but at the end of the day, it's the court's decision. They pretty much made it clear that they get the decision about what is and isn't standing.
that's why I'm hoping the Supreme Court says that's not standing to sue, because that would set great precedents for going forward,
Yeah.
for the pro-life movement. Maybe not so much for their abortion industry movement, because they count on those NARAL lawsuits and Planned Parenthood lawsuits and all that jazz. But like,
Mm.
I sorry, the throwing my phone out the window was a bad
Yeah, it's all right. Sometimes a
uh,
metaphor makes sense when it's in your head, and then when it comes out, it doesn't always work out.
exactly. What I should have said is it's like actually the what I was trying to get at is what the attorney was trying to say, and I kind of worded it wrong. It's like take Apple suing the state for consumer uh, safety laws.
Hmm.
You have Planned
Well,
Parenthood suing the state on when they're trying to create consumer behavior or consumer safety laws.
yeah. If that was the case, I'm pretty sure there's organizations that have tried to do that, but I'd have to check and take a look at that. Um, I mean, theoretically, there are a lot of arguments for ending because theoretically an injury could mean a lot of different things. It really depends upon uh, the court's interpretation of what is and isn't a valid injury. So, like, if someone really wanted to jump the gun on the abortion issue and said we're taking too much financial burden from this decision, they could argue that it's an undue financial burden on their system. But I'm not sure how far that would go. So as far as the standing question goes, it really, really depends, and I don't think there's a concrete answer there.
Um, and yeah, with that, we can kind of turn gears to COVID-19.
Yes, sir.
And first off, where's the Supreme Court during COVID-19? Where are they coming up with these?
I'm actually mad at the Supreme Court because
Where's these cases coming out of? Are they like typing to each
it,
other?
I
And
think it's argued digitally because like they tend to record their oral arguments. Like for example, on OIA, you can actually like listen to the arguments of recent court decisions. And if it's okay, I'll show my sources for all the things I said today and throughout this thing later in your comment section. But on OIA, they tend to record and upload these things to the public. So if I had to guess, they're doing it digitally and then recording what's being said through it. I actually had read recently that there was an issue with people getting mad at the court because they refused to meet personally, but required people in Wisconsin to show up in person to vote. Like they're making the voters risk their lives to vote, but they won't do the same to run the
I,
government.
I think that's ludicrous. I saw that too, and the courts held it. It's like what?
That's yeah. I think when you ask the people to exercise one of their rights while at the same time putting them in a circumstance that is threatening to their life, you better damn well be able um, to do the same. You better put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. And the court didn't do that. They basically said it's your problem, not ours.
Yeah, I agree. So kind of now that we're in the COVID-19 realm of questions, what are your thoughts on states starting to reopen as of some states are expiring their stay-at-home orders on April 30th and going to open up the state gradually starting May 1st. What are your thoughts?
So just a bit of context. You can still see me, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So just a bit of context for this. There is a lot of misinformation about the severity of COVID-19. For one, a lot of people think if you're older, you're the only one that really is at risk. And to some extent, it's true. but both Yale Medicine and USA Today actually pointed out an estimated 20% of all Americans who are hospitalized for COVID-19 are younger adults between the ages of 20 and 44 years of age. So that means a lot of people are being hospitalized. And if you open up your state too early, you could put yourself at your state and your population at great risk for overwhelming your hospital system with people who, for all intents and purposes, never should have been infected in the first place, and you dilute resources that should be going to people who really need it. Secondly, there are actually several phases in a pandemic. For one, there's recognition, initiation, acceleration, deceleration, and preparation. So this means like for the last three areas: acceleration, deceleration, and preparation. Acceleration is when the virus infection and death rates begin to go spike, they reach their peak, and deceleration is when they start to go down, and then preparation is where the public health officials can finally say, yeah, we're getting it safer and safer with our industry. The United States is currently in acceleration. It is not even in its deceleration state. So when it comes to the states opening up, the national death rate is not reaching its peak yet. So it can be extremely dangerous. And furthermore, it really could backfire on us if a lot of our workers get sick. That could undermine the economy too. So that's just my opinion on it.
Sorry, that's great. I'm just pulling up. So if you see me looking away, just kind of pull up a world coronavirus map
from the John Hopkins.
I'm just trying to find like CDC or something.
Yeah, and I'll link all my stuff here too. So, because I want full transparency to the audience and to you. So exactly. I have my stuff written down, and I can even put it in the chat too.
Okay,
but the chat disappears. So, but yeah, should I say something else? Because I do have a little bit more to point out. So.
Yeah, just a second here. I don't know if this is able. That's not what I wanted to do. Unless I can do this.
If you'd like, I can show the John Hopkins map.
I'm just trying to pull up where I can like write on the, write on it,
Oh yeah. So you can like sort of contextualize it.
Yeah.
I would also say that historically speaking, areas that opened up too early really put themselves at greater risk. I have this from the influenza archive right here. So they ended up opening up, and like for example, in 1 month, San Francisco had 20,000 cases of influenza and over 1,000 deaths. And on November 13th, the Board of Health actually opened to lift the ban. They ended up still having trouble containing it.
What country is this?
It wasn't a country, it was a city, San Francisco in 1918. So opening up too quickly can really be devastating for a lot of people. Yep. That's from John Hopkins. That's my numbers too.
All right, perfect. So we will. All right, so yeah, people can still see us if you're looking at the screen on the right. So what I want to just kind of talk about right now, Connor, is these numbers here that we have.
Yep. I also looked at the document you sent me, so.
Get to draw. Where's the free? I
also have your document that you sent me. So.
Okay, this works. All right, so we have. Okay, we might get to that. Which one did I send you again?
That was the vital statistics reference guidance. So
okay.
That's for certifying deaths.
Okay.
There's more to it than what you thought it was. Just out of respect.
Well, either way, they're lying. So.
No, I'll explain it in a moment. We'll get to that.
So I kind of just drew a line there. I'll try to draw better. better one there. So because this didn't do it, okay. No, that number's right here. Sorry, I'm just trying to like. This is a really bad idea, isn't it?
Well, I guess some editing will have to be done, huh?
Well, no, I am not editing this video. So sorry, guys. See all my lines. I just wanted to. But who knows? By this time, everybody will shut it off.
Really interesting.
Is that number, Connor? Is that number right for Russia? Didn't they have
For
794
Russia,
deaths?
where's Russia? Right here. Russia, 14,700. Hold on, let me look at Russia. Cases, COVID-19.
I just need to know what the deaths right there.
Yeah, hold on. Death count. Death count for Russia. John Hopkins says it's 794 deaths. So that's correct.
That's what I have.
Yeah, that's correct. Granted, they're constantly updating it, and I wouldn't be surprised if Russia's covering it up.
All right, we'll just stop here. I think this is the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, top 15. So I'll stop with my weird lines there. So yeah, this is what I want to talk about. Is if you see this number here, this 980,008 cases that the United States has, which is way more than the one in the runner-up in the Spain spot. They went above Italy and France and Germany, and even China. China dropped almost. Sorry, I don't know if I can scroll down there or not. Oh, I just messed up all my lines. That's cool. If you look at South Korea, I mean they're already down to 10,738, and China, I don't even think they're on this list right now. But it's like, where did we screw up?
So, first of all, I think it's important to note differences in population and response will dictate how much each country has, how much it is per capita, and just really what it's going to be in terms of overwhelming the healthcare system. With China, I'd be careful to trust their numbers, mostly because their reporting system went down near the beginning. So when it actually started to get really bad, their entire reporting system collapsed. So that means that their numbers may A, be unintentionally incorrect, and B, there's also a political impetus for them to keep it incorrect. And they're still up, and as more things come out, chances are we'll get the more accurate numbers. Really, what you should be looking at is India, because India is the second largest population in the world, and it has nowhere near the amount of deaths or cases that we have. And America is the third largest country in terms of population, yet it has far more deaths. So I can pull up the John Hopkins one.
India has 28,380.
Yeah, and they only have 886 cases, 886 deaths.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're just doing exceptionally well. Are they testing more people? Are they what's going on there?
So Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, has actually been pretty strict about social distancing protocols and closing down the country. It's actually pretty impressive considering how dense the population of India is in terms of like how close together they are. Normally, if I had been like to predict how this would go before we know what we know, I would actually say that India would be more at risk because of its population density.
Yeah,
but because of the quick response and the fact that they are beginning to address some of the differences between the rural communities and their industrial communities, they're doing a bit better. It's also worth noting that the United States did not handle this very well. The New York Times had a great piece, and I shared it on Facebook a while back, that discussed how Trump's advisors at the National Security Council's office, Peter Navarro, explicitly warned Trump that they needed to begin considering the effects of a pandemic on the population at large. And Dr. Kadlec actually explicitly warned that if these people were asymptomatic, which they ended up being, the population would be at even greater risk. The National Security Council warned Trump in late January that we needed to shut down across the board. And we did not get a public announcement of that until March. So an entire month went by before we took national action. Now it's not entirely Trump's fault, I will say, to be fair to Trump. Historically, governments have been slow to respond to pandemics because they don't want to cause a panic. And that's perfectly fair, but I think you have to, when you're dealing with your advisors providing information, warning you about the dangers that come with such a rapidly spreading pandemic and disease, you have to take stock that sometimes the government action is necessary, and we didn't get that. Some states were even really slow, like Michigan took a while, a bit.
Sorry, I'm just updating the date there. I had it wrong first. March 17th, I believe, is when they closed the country down.
And Illinois closed, I think, a little earlier.
And then May 1st is when certain states are opening back up, which is 40 days.
Yeah.
Quarantine.
So,
which I find very, very faithful there. But the thing that kind of I want to get to now is, have you seen any of the New York governor's, Cuomo's, press releases and how he is advocating for social distancing, blah, blah, blah. And his brother actually had COVID-19. And a citizen was riding his bike and saw at the Cuomo residence that they weren't social distancing. He was not isolating himself. And he comes right up to this constituent and he basically just doesn't listen, tells him to stop. And it's like, you're not even practicing what you're preaching, dude. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. Whether or not Cuomo is practicing it doesn't change. We should. But he is being a hypocrite on that front. You don't have to defend a person's personal actions to defend the policy which saves lives. Cuomo should be practicing what he preaches. He should be taking this a little more seriously when it comes to his personal effects. But in terms of his social distancing policy in New York, in terms of just his government action, that is it's crazy because he's dealing with about 21,000 deaths now in New York. So I think on the one hand, it's absolutely hypocritical of him, but on the other hand, that hypocrisy cannot be, we shouldn't use that as a means to sort of undermine the social distancing policies because New York is the epicenter of the pandemic. We have to be more focused on saving lives rather than calling out public officials that when it does nothing. When this is all over, he should be held responsible, whether that's at the ballot box or whatever. But right now, my main thing is policy over partisan.
Right. It's his brother though. I don't know if I clarified that. But
no, I meant to say his brother and things like that. So yeah.
And not to keep interrupting you, but the thing is that this would not be the first time that someone has come in contact with somebody and the person that has COVID knows it. Should they be held liable if they pass the virus on? And how
Absolutely. So? In my opinion, I think if you can prove intent, which is always difficult regardless of what you're trying to prosecute them for, but if you can prove intent that they knew that they were infected and they were putting other people at risk, then I think they should take some form of criminal or civil action against them. Civil's probably more practical because we don't need to throw more people into prison because prisons are generally crowded and and it takes too long and too many resources will be spent on that could be spent on protecting people. So I would think if someone actively comes into contact with somebody, put a statutory thing in there that says a fine, like, I don't know, 1,200 or something that makes it so you hit what they care about. In this case, their wallet.
I agree 100%. And thank you for that that insight that you have with your with whether it be your politics or your history or your insight today was great. I thank you for that. We may disagree. We may disagree on some things. If you've seen the Facebook, to all the audience out there, if you've seen the Facebook, I'm sorry. I'm sure Connor's not sorry because he's debating me.
Oh, the one where I called. Are you referring to the one where I called the protesters idiots? I called them much worse than that.
All of them in general. But anyways, we apologize to the audience out there.
I don't.
But yeah, my guess, yeah, Connor doesn't, but
no, I stand by him.
But yeah, I stand by most of my arguments too as well. But and yeah, so I think people need to continue social distancing, and these states will ease up. And I honestly think, I know Connor, you don't want to hear this, but I don't know if I'm going to vote for him yet because I got to hear all things. But Trump's on his way to get reelected due to the fact that he's giving states rights to open up on their own. I know some states don't like that idea. Some states don't like the idea that he is giving them the rights to make their own decisions and give the governors those decisions. But I think it needs to be on county by county basis around the United States.
My response to that is that I don't think so much he's giving them the right. It's already constitutionally theirs in the first place because the 10th Amendment gives rights that are not declared to the federal government, to the states, and then to the people. So I think that since in the past with Jacobson v. Massachusetts, the states have generally had the authority to protect the people within their own borders according to what they believe the public welfare is. And that's where I think it's not so much he gives it to them, but that may be the sense of other people who think he gives it to them.
Right. Well, the states can, the federal government can overarch that. I know everything that's not in the Constitution is given to the states, but at the same time, the government can, through national emergencies, can take more responsibility and uphold that.
But they have to make it a national security issue rather than just simply we're in charge now. They have to tie it to a specific power of the government. Otherwise, it strays from the Constitution.
Well, the Department of Public Health right now. So, but right now, since my computer is dying, and I'm sorry, the audience did not need to know that, but that's fine because who knows who will still be watching at that point, right? Thank you. If you are still watching, thank you. Connor, thank you for coming on today. And until next time, I am wrapping it up and signing off, Callahan Corner. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.